What if I told you Meghan Markle just lost the one royal title she thought no one could take away, and it's now in the hands of a quiet, unexpected Windsor? The air was thick with suspense as the cameras flashed in rapid succession across the gates of Buckingham Palace. It was supposed to be a quiet morning. No public events. No scheduled appearances. No grand announcement teased in advance. But something was brewing behind the towering stone walls of one of the world's most iconic royal institutions. At precisely 9 a.m. London time, the palace issued a brief, 7-sentence statement that would send shockwaves across Britain, rattle the core of royal watchers worldwide, and erupt into a media frenzy across both sides of the Atlantic. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Lady Louise Windsor, the soft-spoken daughter of Prince Edward and granddaughter of the late Queen Elizabeth II, had been formally named the new Duchess of Sussex. The title, once held by Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, had been quietly reassigned by the authority of King Charles III. No fanfare. No formal transition ceremony. No inclusion of the Sussexes in the process. Just a clinical, pointed, and irreversible decree. Lady Louise was now Duchess of Sussex. Meghan and Harry's royal chapter, it seemed, had not only ended but had been closed, shelved, and burned. What followed was a series of reactions so polarized and emotional that even seasoned royal correspondents found themselves struggling to keep their analysis from turning into opinion. British tabloids declared it a corrective strike, a royal rebuke years in the making. American media, particularly sympathetic to Meghan, called it a betrayal, an institutional snub designed to punish independence and silence criticism. And in California, where Meghan and Harry reportedly first heard the news via push notification and not through the family, the silence was thunderous. According to insiders, Harry locked himself in his private office for hours. Meghan, stunned, paced the house in disbelief. But why this move? Why now? Why Lady Louise? And what does it mean that the title of Sussex, a name branded into Netflix documentaries, Spotify deals, Archwell Foundation logos, and millions of dollars worth of digital real estate, is now completely out of their reach? To understand the gravity of this seismic decision, one must travel back, not just 5 years to the Megxit moment, but decades into the royal lineage, traditions, and expectations that govern the House of Windsor. The title of Duke or Duchess is not simply a name, it is a symbol. It carries with it a responsibility, an unspoken contract of loyalty, discretion, and public service. It's not just about being born royal or marrying into it. It's about upholding a deeply entrenched value system that, for centuries, has defined who stays in and who is left behind. When Prince Harry and Meghan Markle stepped back from royal duties in 2020, their decision stunned the world. For the first time since the abdication crisis of 1936, a senior royal voluntarily walked away from the throne's expectations. Their interview with Oprah Winfrey in 2021 only deepened the divide, accusations of racism within the institution, of being silenced, of being emotionally abandoned. The palace, in its famously terse fashion, replied with a line that history will never forget. Recollections may vary, but despite the interviews, documentaries, memoirs, and public projects, one thing remained intact: the title. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex. It was a lifeline, a royal seal they retained despite severing their roles. It gave legitimacy to their public image and business ventures. It connected them to a brand far older and more influential than any Hollywood studio could ever offer. And now, with a single announcement, that link has been extinguished. Lady Louise Mountbatten Windsor is not a name that often trends on social media or dominates front-page tabloids. At 20, she's largely been out of the limelight, choosing a quieter, more traditional path of education, service, and support to her family. But those who know her closely describe her as a Windsor in blood and spirit, graceful, respectful of tradition, and deeply bonded with her grandparents, Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. During the Queen's funeral, her composed presence drew attention, prompting whispers in palace corridors that perhaps this young woman, previously sidelined by royal order of precedence, was quietly being prepared for something greater. And so, when King Charles made the decision to reassign the Sussex title to her, insiders say it was not a random act of retaliation, but a calculated, symbolic reset. A reset that would reinforce who belonged within the trusted inner circle of the monarchy and who had chosen a different path. The monarchy has always been about continuity, about resilience, about adapting just enough to survive the times, but not too much to lose its identity. In many ways, Meghan and Harry had tested the boundaries of that balance more aggressively than anyone since King Edward VIII. The timing of the announcement was deliberate. Just days before a scheduled international climate summit where Prince Harry was set to appear as a guest speaker, public records had listed him as Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex. Now, that credential is obsolete. The palace's message was clear. You may use the name Harry, but Sussex no longer belongs to you. That level of public stripping, usually reserved for disgraced royals embroiled in scandal, was seen as an extraordinary step. But what scandal, if any, had taken place? Had there been a new betrayal? A secret project that crossed the line? Or was this simply the final act of a monarchy closing its ranks, eliminating ambiguity, and refusing to be monetized by what it now views as outsiders? Some speculate that a secret project Meghan had pitched to a major U.S. streaming platform, a behind-the-scenes dramatization of her time as Duchess, may have crossed a red line. Others believe Harry's rumored second memoir, with alleged harsher details about his brother and stepmother, may have accelerated the Crown's urgency to act. Either way, the decision wasn't reactionary. According to a retired royal courtier quoted anonymously in The Times, this move was in the works for nearly a year. It was signed, sealed, and waiting for the appropriate moment to deliver the message. And deliver it they did. But what does this mean for Lady Louise? Unlike Harry, she wasn't born into headlines. She has no Netflix deal, no Spotify podcast, no memoir, no brand endorsements. Yet she now inherits a title previously worn in global spotlight. Some experts worry the sudden thrust into visibility may be overwhelming for her. Others argue that she represents the monarchy's last hope for restoring dignity to the Sussex name. In private, Lady Louise is said to have been reluctant, unsure whether the title was a gift or a burden. Still, her acceptance, confirmed with the words, "I accept the responsibility placed before me," was received with warm applause at a private royal dinner attended by senior working royals. Queen Camilla, reportedly emotional, raised a glass and toasted her late mother-in-law's wisdom in laying the foundation of future strength. Meanwhile, Meghan and Harry remained silent. No tweets, no statements, no denials. Their R12 website still lists them as the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, though as of today, that designation is inaccurate. Whether they will update it or ignore the reality is unclear. But what is certain is that they no longer own the title that defined their royal journey. This moment isn't just a matter of semantics. It's a declaration that the monarchy will not tolerate partial loyalty, that titles will not be worn like fashion accessories, that branding oneself as royalty without serving the realm will not go unchallenged. And for those watching closely, the meaning is unmistakable. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry are not just out. They are gone. The royal door, once held ajar in hopes of reconciliation, has been slammed and bolted shut. And standing quietly in the hallway where Harry once walked is Lady Louise, the new Duchess of Sussex. There is something deeply sacred about titles in the British royal family. Unlike celebrity accolades or temporary honors that can fade with time, royal titles are steeped in bloodline, tradition, and institutional symbolism. The House of Windsor does not treat them as decorative flourishes. They are emblems of duty, loyalty, and unbreakable allegiance to crown and country. When Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were granted the titles of Duke and Duchess of Sussex on their wedding day, it wasn't just a gesture of celebration. It was a coronation of trust, a signal to the world that they were not only being welcomed into the royal fold, they were being tasked with carrying the banner of monarchy into the modern age. To understand the magnitude of what has just happened, the complete revocation of the Sussex title from Harry and Meghan and its reassignment to Lady Louise, you must first grasp the significance of that title itself. The Dukedom of Sussex, though not as old as others like Cornwall or York, has always carried weight. It is historically linked to progressiveness, independence, and controversial challenges to royal orthodoxy. The first Duke of Sussex, Prince Augustus Frederick, son of King George III, was known for being ahead of his time. He was a supporter of Catholic emancipation, freedom of the press, and even social reform that challenged aristocratic dominance. But even more ironically, the original Duke of Sussex was not permitted to pass on his title to his children. Why? Because he married without the king's consent, violating the Royal Marriages Act of 1772. Sound familiar? The parallels between Prince Augustus and Prince Harry are glaring. Both broke with royal tradition. Both married women who disrupted expectations. And both found themselves, in the end, pushed to the margins of royal favor. Yet while Prince Augustus remained within the royal family in title and dignity until his death, Prince Harry has now lost what his ancestor never did, his right to claim the title publicly. In stripping Harry of this dukedom and assigning it instead to Lady Louise, the crown has effectively rewritten the narrative of the title itself. It is no longer a banner of rebellion wrapped in royal garb. It is now a symbol of redemption, of return to royal values, and of quiet, dutiful strength. The monarchy has taken something chaotic and controversial and handed it to a young woman who has made no speeches, taken no interviews, and never threatened to walk away. And that's the point. In the modern monarchy, silence and loyalty are the most valuable currencies. Not headlines, not followers, not Hollywood deals. But let's take a step back. Why do titles matter at all? In a world moving faster toward democracy, globalism, and institutional transparency, why should anyone care who holds the title of Duke or Duchess of Sussex? Because the British monarchy still functions as both a political and symbolic powerhouse. Titles are not merely ceremonial. They come with influence. They shape public opinion. They shape the branding of charity ventures, educational programs, and even diplomatic meetings. When Prince Harry traveled the globe in his role as Duke of Sussex, doors opened. When Meghan signed deals with global corporations, the Duchess, in her name, made everything sound official, timeless, and regal. Even their Archewell Foundation leaned heavily on the Sussex brand to attract interest, money, and media support. Now imagine all of that stripped away, not by scandal or crime, but by decree. What does that do to public perception? What does it say about trust? About permanence? About consequence? It says that the monarchy is still a system rooted in accountability, but accountability measured by loyalty rather than legality. You can break no law and still lose everything if your actions are interpreted as disloyal to the crown. And for King Charles III, the time had come to draw a line. The Sussex title wasn't just being misused, it was, in the eyes of the palace, being abused. This is why Lady Louise's installment as Duchess of Sussex matters beyond just optics. It reframes the story. It turns the title from a source of tension into a new beginning. For years, royal commentators speculated who might rise quietly behind the scenes to help modernize the monarchy in a way that wasn't polarizing. Lady Louise, with her deep respect for protocol and her rejection of tabloid fame, became an unexpected candidate. Her new title isn't just a promotion. It's a declaration of alignment. It announces to the world that the Sussex name is back in the hands of someone who won't weaponize it. Yet some critics argue this move comes across as petty, even vindictive. They say that titles shouldn't be stripped over disagreements or public relations crises. But the monarchy doesn't operate on the logic of democracy. It never has. It operates on perception, continuity, and the maintenance of a centuries-old institution that has survived wars, scandals, and internal uprisings. When the public begins to see a title as a tool for financial leverage rather than public service, the crown is forced to act to preserve the dignity of the system. The Sussex title had become toxic, not just because of Meghan and Harry's choices, but because of the endless media wars, the lawsuits, the broken family bonds, and the polarizing public perception. Reassigning the title was not just about punishing them. It was about cleansing the slate, about starting over, about signaling to the public and to future generations of royals that titles come with weight and with consequences. There's another angle worth exploring, the generational meaning of this change. To the older generation, particularly royal traditionalists, the move is a breath of fresh air. It represents the monarchy reclaiming its authority after years of being dragged into media circus territory. To younger audiences, the reaction is more complicated. Many millennials and Gen Z viewers, especially outside the UK, still view Harry and Meghan as victims of a rigid system. To them, the title was part of their identity and their efforts to raise awareness about mental health, racism, and toxic institutions. But even among younger fans, there's growing fatigue. Not everyone is buying the victim narrative anymore. The shift in tone, especially after the collapse of the Spotify deal and lukewarm reactions to their Netflix projects, has made even their supporters question the sincerity of their mission. The title, which once gave credibility, started to look like a mask. And when masks fall, they often take names with them. In that vacuum steps Lady Louise. Not flashy, not scandalous, not provocative, just steady, which is exactly what the monarchy needs to remind the world of its deeper values. Titles are not tools of identity, they are tools of service. And those who use them without service eventually lose them. The real symbolism behind the reassignment is that the royal family is no longer waiting for apologies, no longer tolerating half-in, half-out arrangements. The Sussex name has been reclaimed, not just in name, but in spirit. It now belongs to someone who has never once threatened to walk away, never sold private details to the press, and never turned the crown into a stage. The implications of this move will be felt for years. How charities align themselves. How history books categorize the Harry-Meghan era. How future titles are assigned and revoked. It redefines what it means to be part of the firm not just by birth, but by behavior. And in a monarchy that prizes symbolism as much as it does bloodline, there can be no greater blow than losing your title, not through death or abdication, but through rejection. The Duchess of Sussex now lives in Windsor, not Montecito. There was a time when their love story captivated the world. Prince Harry, the rebellious red-haired prince with a tragic past and a reputation for spontaneity, had finally found love. Meghan Markle, an American actress, biracial, divorced, and politically outspoken, was a breath of fresh air, an outsider in every sense of the word. Their union was hailed as modern, bold, and a necessary evolution for an ancient institution struggling to remain relevant in the 21st century. On May 19, 2018, as Meghan walked down the aisle of St. George's Chapel in Windsor Castle, the world didn't just witness a royal wedding. They saw a turning point, a moment of transformation where tradition bent to meet diversity, culture, and a more inclusive future. For a while, it worked. The newly minted Duke and Duchess of Sussex drew massive crowds on royal tours. Their South Pacific visit in 2018 was widely praised. Meghan's speeches on women's empowerment and Harry's unwavering support of her made them a beloved team on the world stage. They were dubbed the Fab Four alongside Prince William and Catherine. Publications from Time to Vogue painted them as the future of the monarchy. This was not just another royal couple. This was the royal couple that would lead a cultural shift inside the most scrutinized family on earth. But beneath the glittering public image, cracks were forming. Insiders at the palace began whispering of tension, of communication breakdowns, of staff turnover at alarming rates. Meghan, they said, was headstrong, opinionated, and unfamiliar with the hierarchical nature of the royal machinery. Harry, protective to a fault, was said to grow increasingly distant from his brother, William, who took issue with the couple's desire to chart their own course. The friction wasn't just internal, it was structural. Meghan wanted flexibility, influence, and a voice. The royal institution wanted discretion, duty, and tradition. Things began to unravel publicly with the 2019 Africa tour. During what was supposed to be a triumphant return to global adoration, Meghan revealed to ITV journalist Tom Bradby that she was not okay. The vulnerability stunned viewers. A duchess, on official duty, admitting to emotional distress. For her fans, it was a moment of relatability. For royal traditionalists, it was a breach of decorum. Royals were supposed to smile, wave, and serve, not show cracks in the armor. The seeds of separation were already being planted. Then came the bombshell, January 2020. In a late-night Instagram post, Harry and Meghan announced they were stepping back from senior royal duties. They would split their time between the United Kingdom and North America. They would become financially independent. They would continue to support the Queen, but not within the confines of palace obligations. The plan caught even the royal family off guard. Reportedly, no senior royal was briefed before the post went live. Queen Elizabeth, blindsided, summoned an emergency meeting at Sandringham to address the crisis now being dubbed Megxit. The outcome was a compromise that was no compromise. Meghan and Harry would lose public funding. They would no longer use Royal Highness in official capacity. They would repay the funds used to renovate Frogmore Cottage. But they would retain the Duke and Duchess of Sussex titles, a middle ground that tried to preserve family dignity while allowing the couple their independence. But independence, as it turned out, came with a cost. The years that followed became a whirlwind of interviews, deals, and drama. Meghan and Harry signed a reported $100 million deal with Netflix. They launched a podcast under Spotify. They established Archwell, their philanthropic and media brand. They bought a mansion in Montecito, California, and began aligning themselves with American celebrity culture. For many, it was a bold rebranding. For others, it was royal capital being spent like celebrity currency. Then came the Oprah interview in March 2021. In one of the most watched interviews of the decade, Meghan and Harry revealed stunning allegations, conversations about the color of their unborn child's skin, Meghan being denied mental health support, Harry being financially cut off. The fallout was immediate. Buckingham Palace released a cautious but pointed statement. The issues raised, particularly that of race, are concerning. While some recollections may vary, they are taken very seriously. The phrase "recollections may vary" became a cultural shorthand for royal pushback. The interview further deepened the divide. In the U.S., sympathy swelled for Meghan and Harry. In the UK, the couple was accused of damaging the monarchy's reputation for personal gain. Prince William's one-sentence rebuttal, "We are very much not a racist family," was the only direct comment he made. But behind the scenes, the damage was done. Trust was eroded. Private conversations were seen as potential headlines. Every phone call risked becoming a quote in a documentary. Over time, cracks appeared even in the couple's post-royal ventures. The Spotify deal fell apart, with a company executive publicly criticizing them as grifters. Their Netflix content, while initially buzzworthy, began to draw mixed reviews. Critics argued the couple was repeating the same narrative, victimhood, betrayal, and escape, without offering anything new. Internally, reports emerged that the couple's production team was struggling with creative direction. Rumors of tension between Meghan and her Hollywood collaborators started to swirl. Harry's memoir, Spare, brought in huge sales but also deepened public skepticism. His allegations, fights with William, drug use, losing his virginity in a field behind a pub, raised eyebrows even among his fans. The dignity of a prince, they said, was being sold for catharsis. By late 2023, the honeymoon with the public had largely faded. What began as a daring departure now looked, to some, like a long, drawn-out grievance tour. The British public had turned. Polls showed declining support for the Sussexes. Even in the U.S., support among younger generations dropped. Headlines shifted from admiration to ridicule. The once revered brand of the Sussexes began to lose its luster. It didn't help that their charitable efforts were often eclipsed by PR stunts and celebrity appearances. While they had launched meaningful projects, like Meghan's support for paid family leave or Harry's work on mental health with veterans, those efforts rarely broke through the noise of royal drama. And when compared to the steady, scandal-free work of Prince William and Catherine, or the quiet loyalty of Princess and now Lady Louise, the Sussexes began to feel more like reality TV characters than former royals with a mission. Inside Buckingham Palace, the patience that Queen Elizabeth once offered began to erode under King Charles. Unlike his mother, Charles was more sensitive to perception. He believed the monarchy needed discipline, not constant crisis management. Every time Harry and Meghan spoke out, the institution had to react. The drip-feed of royal revelations forced the family to expend energy and resources that could have been used elsewhere. Charles wanted to draw a line, and with the Queen gone, there was no one left to advocate for grace. The fall of the Sussexes wasn't a crash. It was a slow descent, a combination of miscalculations, overexposure, and strategic misfires. They believed their story would always carry weight, that the world would continue to watch, sympathize, and support. But eventually, the narrative grew stale. The victimhood wore thin. And the public, fickle, forgetful, and always chasing the next controversy, moved on. Now, with the loss of their Sussex title, the final page of their royal chapter has been written not by them, but by the crown. It is an erasure more final than exile. Without the title, they are no longer representatives of a historic lineage. They are, at best, celebrities who used to be royal. At worst, exiles who turned on their family. It's difficult not to see this moment as a cautionary tale. About fame, about loyalty, about the clash between tradition and individualism. Meghan and Harry had the chance to transform the monarchy. But instead of reforming it from within, they chose to challenge it from the outside and lost the title that made them unforgettable. It was a name most people outside of Britain barely recognized. Lady Louise Alice Elizabeth Mary Mountbatten Windsor. A young woman who, until recently, had managed to live most of her life outside the glare of public scrutiny, quietly attending university, participating in modest royal events, and showing no visible ambition to climb into the spotlight. She was, in every sense of the word, the opposite of Meghan Markle. And perhaps that's precisely why she was chosen. The reassignment of the Sussex title to Lady Louise didn't just shock the world, it stunned even many within royal circles. There had been whispers that King Charles was looking to strengthen the inner core of the monarchy. Rumors of quiet grooming sessions, closed-door meetings, and sudden upticks in Louise's public appearances had circulated for over a year. But few thought the young woman who had so rarely been photographed or quoted in the press would one day inherit a title that had become one of the most recognizable in royal history. To understand why this choice mattered, we must first understand who Lady Louise truly is, and why her character represents more than just a name or a face within the Windsor dynasty. Born prematurely on November 8, 2003, Louise arrived into the world during a moment of personal difficulty for her parents. Her mother, Sophie, Countess of Wessex, suffered a life-threatening placental abruption and nearly lost her life during childbirth. The birth, early and traumatic, marked Louise's entry into the royal world with a cloud of vulnerability. Her father, Prince Edward, the youngest of Queen Elizabeth II's 4 children, had always maintained a low profile. Together, Edward and Sophie had committed to raising their children with as much normalcy as possible, despite the blue blood running through their veins. Louise was raised without the trappings of royalty. She attended a local school, rode horses competitively, and developed a close bond with both of her grandparents, Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip. It was these relationships, especially the one she shared with the late Queen, that would go on to shape not just Louise's view of duty, but her understanding of restraint, honor, and legacy. At royal events, she was often seen walking beside the Queen, always slightly behind, rarely speaking to the press, never seeking the spotlight. Yet observers who paid attention noted her poise. At Prince Philip's funeral in 2021, she carried herself with a quiet maturity that caught the attention of many. While the media fixated on the tension between Harry and William, in the absence of Meghan, Louise stood like a pillar beside her parents, dignified and focused. That same year, when the Queen turned 95, insiders reported that it was Louise who gifted her a handwritten letter expressing gratitude for her teachings on service, modesty, and duty. The Queen, reportedly moved by the gesture, began spending more time with her granddaughter at Windsor Castle. Royal aides noted that in private, the Queen would refer to Louise as the one who listens. Not the one who performs, not the one who demands, but the one who listens. This behavior would become a defining theme in the years that followed. As Harry and Meghan dominated headlines with explosive interviews and lavish brand deals, Louise quietly went about her life. She enrolled at the University of St. Andrews, the same institution where Prince William and Catherine met. But unlike her cousin William, she never leveraged her royal status. She was known simply as Louise Windsor to classmates. No special treatment, no media entourages, no bodyguards unless required. She took public transportation. She ate in the communal dining hall. She was, by design, raised to be grounded. The decision by her parents not to style her as Her Royal Highness from birth was deliberate. In a 2020 interview, Sophie stated plainly, "We try to bring them up with the understanding that they are very likely to have to work for a living." That mindset, rare among royals, had a profound impact on Louise's perspective. She grew up viewing her position not as a privilege, but as a duty that needed to be earned, not inherited. That humility would later become one of her greatest assets. As the monarchy entered a period of turbulence following Queen Elizabeth's death, King Charles began to look closely at the next generation. He was determined to slim down the monarchy, fewer titles, fewer working royals, more efficiency, and a clear code of conduct. Those who supported this approach viewed it as necessary modernization. Those who didn't saw it as harsh discipline. Either way, there was consensus on one point. Titles could no longer be handed out without consideration of the bearer's values. By late 2024, the question of the Sussex title had become a source of internal tension. According to palace insiders, King Charles was growing increasingly frustrated with the Sussex brand being used in commercial ventures that contradicted royal ethics. Meghan's rumored plans to produce a semi-fictionalized drama about her royal life reportedly infuriated senior courtiers. Harry's second memoir, rumored to contain more bombshells, only deepened the rift. The tipping point came when the Archewell Foundation was accused of misreporting funds, an investigation that, while later resolved, cast further doubt on the couple's stewardship of the title. Behind closed doors, the palace began searching for a replacement. Lady Louise was never part of the initial discussions. She had no interest in ascending into the royal spotlight. But when approached by senior advisors, she reportedly asked only one question: what would Granny have wanted? It was this response, sources say, that swayed King Charles. In his private writings, he described Louise as wise beyond her years and possessing the grace of her grandmother and the discipline of her father. The final decision was made during a private council, attended by Queen Camilla, Prince William, Princess Anne, and Prince Edward. Sophie, Louise's mother, was not invited to prevent conflict of interest. In the meeting, Louise was proposed as the future Duchess of Sussex, not as a placeholder, but as a permanent reclaimer of a title that had lost its honor. At first, Louise was hesitant. She knew what the title meant. She had seen how it could elevate or destroy. But with guidance from Princess and arguably the most respected working royal, she came to understand that her quiet strength was precisely what the crown needed to restore dignity to the name. The announcement, when made, took the public by surprise. Here was a young woman with no social media, no public scandals, no multi-million-dollar deals, no memoirs, no drama. And yet she was being entrusted with one of the most controversial titles in modern royal history. Critics questioned the decision. Was it a slap in the face to Harry and Meghan? Was Louise ready for such responsibility? But supporters saw the genius in the move. By appointing someone so visibly detached from ambition, the monarchy sent a clear signal. Titles are not trophies for rebellion. They are not tools for branding. They are commitments to continuity. Since assuming the title, Lady Louise has maintained her original disposition. She has declined interviews. She has continued her studies. She has taken on a limited set of public duties, mostly related to youth education, environmental conservation, and equestrian sports, areas where she has long-standing passion. When asked by a child during a school visit if she would be the new Meghan Markle, her answer was simple and profound. No, I'll just be me. That statement was met with warm applause and later quoted in several national newspapers as a moment of clarity. The monarchy wasn't trying to recreate Meghan. It was trying to undo the chaos and find peace in someone who didn't want to be a princess, but who was willing to serve like one. Behind palace doors, Lady Louise is already being seen as a stabilizing force for the future. She attends regular briefings with Queen Camilla and works closely with Princess Anne on regional visits. Prince William, known for being cautious with praise, is said to have described her as a reminder of what royal service is meant to be. Her relationship with her cousins, particularly Prince George and Princess Charlotte, has strengthened. She serves as a mentor of sorts, especially for Charlotte, who reportedly looks up to Louise for guidance on how to balance public life with private boundaries. Lady Louise's presence also neutralizes a cultural debate that has long divided public opinion, whether modern royals must become celebrities to remain relevant. In her, we see a rejection of that notion. We see a royal who has earned her place not through headlines or scandals, but through discretion, consistency, and emotional intelligence. She does not perform for cameras. She does not publish grievances. She does not try to be relatable by becoming ordinary. Instead, she dignifies her role by staying grounded in humility. As for the weight of the Sussex title, she carries it not as a prize but as a responsibility. In her first official speech, given at a youth scholarship event, she said the following: "Service is not about being seen. It's about seeing others." That line was later quoted in Parliament by a royal minister as an example of leadership done right. It is too early to predict exactly how history will view Lady Louise's tenure as Duchess of Sussex. But if early indications mean anything, she may very well become the royal figure who redeems a title once marked by division and controversy. The grandeur of the crown often masks the burdens it imposes. As King Charles III sits on a throne inherited after 70 years in waiting, he has found himself in a role defined as much by legacy as by crisis management. Unlike his mother, who reigned in an age of limited scrutiny and controlled media narratives, Charles leads the monarchy at a time when every gesture, every word, and every silence is dissected in real time. And behind the public face of calm dignity is a man who has spent years torn between two identities. One as a sovereign, and the other as a father whose youngest son has, time and again, challenged the very foundation of his reign. The decision to strip Harry and Meghan of their Sussex title was not impulsive, nor was it entirely political. It was personal, painful, and rooted in years of emotional trauma, broken communication, and repeated attempts at reconciliation that consistently collapsed under the weight of media headlines and private betrayals. Sources close to the king reveal that the move was long deliberated, agonized over, even. But in the end, the duty of the monarch triumphed over the instincts of the father. The emotional toll of the past few years on King Charles cannot be overstated. While the media has often focused on Meghan and Harry's grievances, Charles's own internal battle has gone largely unexamined. For much of his adult life, Charles was plagued by his reputation as the aloof heir, a man emotionally stunted by royal tradition and vilified in the public eye during the tumultuous years of his marriage to Princess Diana. It took decades of careful PR, soft diplomacy, and loyal service to rehabilitate his image. By the time he ascended the throne, the public saw a matured statesman, less flashy than his mother, but experienced, thoughtful, and finally accepted. Then came the storm. Harry's decision to walk away from royal life in 2020 was a gut punch. While Charles had always known that his youngest son felt like an outsider, the nature and timing of the departure blindsided him. The announcement on Instagram without prior royal coordination was seen by Charles not just as a breach of protocol, but as a betrayal of trust. Worse, it set in motion a series of events that would paint the royal family as archaic, cold, and out of touch. Exactly the kind of image Charles had spent his life trying to reform. Privately, the king was devastated. According to palace insiders, Charles reached out to Harry multiple times in the immediate aftermath of the Megxit declaration, urging him to reconsider, offering compromises, and even proposing a transitional period that would allow the couple to ease out of their royal duties while retaining certain privileges. But Harry, fueled by years of frustration and Meghan's desire for autonomy, stood firm. Their departure was not up for negotiation. Their minds were made up. What followed was a public unraveling of familial bonds. The Oprah interview in 2021 was the breaking point, not just because of its content, but because of its tone. For Charles, hearing his son describe the family as indifferent to mental health struggles, and hearing his daughter-in-law allege racist conversations about their unborn child, was profoundly wounding. The palace issued its now famous response. Recollections may vary, but behind the scenes, Charles was reportedly heartbroken. He believed that private grievances should have remained private, that decades of service should have earned him the benefit of doubt, and that whatever the family's internal dynamics, airing them on international television was a violation of the trust that bound them. Still, Charles did not retaliate. For months following the interview, he maintained a policy of public restraint. He instructed aides not to respond to every media story and refused to strip the couple of their titles, hoping the tension would ease with time. He believed that perhaps, with the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, the family might find common ground once again. But time did not heal the wound. It deepened it. Each new project from the Sussexes, each podcast, docuseries, and press appearance seemed to contain new jabs at the royal family. Harry's memoir, Spare, was perhaps the most damaging. While it painted Harry as a complex, tormented figure, it cast Charles as emotionally distant, obsessed with image, and unwilling to express affection. Even Camilla, who had worked tirelessly to rehabilitate her public image, was not spared. Harry's characterization of her as dangerous and media manipulative reignited a wave of anti-Camilla sentiment online. For Charles, this was a betrayal of the deepest kind. It wasn't just about public image. It was about family. Behind closed doors, the king began to change. No longer was he the hopeful father looking to mend a rift. He became the sovereign force to protect the institution. According to longtime palace advisors, Charles began holding more frequent private meetings with senior royals, including William and Edward, to assess the future of the monarchy. One recurring question dominated these discussions. How can the royal family preserve its authority if two of its most famous members are using royal titles to critique and commercialize the very institution they abandoned? The answer was painful but clear. The Sussex title, once a symbol of hope and modernity, had become a lightning rod for division. In every media deal and legal filing, the title was used as leverage. Even as Harry and Meghan declared their independence from the monarchy, they continued to operate under its name. This contradiction undermined the message of the crown. And for Charles, it became increasingly clear that the title could no longer remain in their hands. But revoking it was no easy task. Unlike working roles and ceremonial privileges, hereditary titles are constitutionally complex. While the monarch has significant influence, the removal or reassignment of a peerage typically involves legal consultation, public justification, and above all moral clarity. Charles needed more than just frustration to act. He needed precedent, evidence, and consensus. He found it in the accumulation of recent events. First was the collapse of the Spotify deal. Executives criticized the couple's output as shallow and infrequent, implying that the success of the deal hinged more on their titles than their content. Then came reports that the Archewell Foundation had misfiled certain financial documents, an administrative error, but one that drew scrutiny. And finally, private briefings revealed that Meghan had been in talks with several networks about a scripted drama loosely based on her time in the royal family, a move seen by palace insiders as a direct monetization of her duchess status. All of this coalesced into a moment of resolve. The time for waiting was over. The final decision was made during a closed meeting at Balmoral Castle in early spring. King Charles met with his top constitutional advisors, legal counsel, and senior members of the royal family. The mood, by all accounts, was somber. This was not a celebration. It was a funeral for a relationship that had once promised transformation. When the idea of Lady Louise inheriting the title was raised, the reaction was cautious but intrigued. Unlike others, Louise had never sought attention. She had never expressed resentment for being kept out of the spotlight. She had shown consistent loyalty, humility, and a clear understanding of the burden of representation. In Louise, Charles saw a chance not just to reclaim the title, but to restore its meaning. Camilla supported the move. William, too, though reportedly urged caution on the timing. But Charles was resolute. He instructed his staff to draft a formal declaration, not a press release, but a sovereign decree, crafted in the traditional style, bearing the royal seal, and filed with the Crown Office. On the day the announcement was made public, Charles remained at Windsor Castle, surrounded by close advisors. He made no statement. He gave no interview. But those present say he looked relieved, exhausted, but relieved. He had not wanted it to come to this. But the decision had to be made. The days that followed were filled with chaos. Media outlets across the globe pounced on the news. Analysts debated its legality. Celebrities chimed in on its morality. Social media lit up with theories, jokes, and outrage. But through it all, the palace remained silent. The king did not explain himself. He let the decision speak. Those closest to him say that Charles still loves his son, that he dreams of reconciliation, that he hopes the distance created by this moment will one day allow for healing. But he also knows that as king, he cannot allow personal affection to compromise institutional integrity. And in that tension lies the deepest tragedy of this chapter. Charles is a man who has waited a lifetime to lead. And in his first true test of leadership, he had to choose between his family and his duty. He chose the crown. The news hit Meghan like a slow-burning fuse, silent at first, then erupting into something raw and unrelenting. It came not in a phone call from Buckingham Palace, nor in a discreet letter from royal counsel. It came the way all seismic shocks arrive in the modern age, through a headline flashing across her phone screen. Lady Louise Windsor named new Duchess of Sussex. She was reportedly standing in her kitchen in Montecito, tea cooling on the marble countertop, Archie's tablet still playing an episode of Octonauts in the background, when the world changed for her once again. The silence was so complete, so sudden, that even the birds outside seemed to pause. For a moment, Meghan just stood there. She didn't gasp. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply froze. Then, quietly, she turned to her assistant and whispered, "So that's how they're going to do it." Those within her inner circle say it wasn't the loss of the title that stung the most. Meghan had long expected the palace to retaliate in some fashion. What pierced deeper was the symbolic nature of the reassignment. Not just that it was stripped from her, but to whom it was given. Lady Louise, the shy girl she once waved at in the back row of church services. The one who barely spoke in public. The one who had always kept her head down and her profile low. It was, in Meghan's eyes, an act of poetic punishment. Not only was she being publicly disowned, but the crown had chosen as her replacement someone who embodied everything she had never been and never aspired to be. Quiet, compliant, traditional. A royal woman who fit perfectly into the mold Meghan had spent years trying to reshape. She saw it as a slap, said one former advisor who worked with Meghan during her early months in the UK. Not just a rejection, but a deliberate humiliation. Back in California, the house grew tense. Prince Harry reportedly left the room when the headline broke. He did not speak for hours. When he did, it was to express what friends described as quiet fury, not loud or explosive, but simmering. "They erased us," he allegedly told a close confidant. "We tried to walk a new path, and they just wiped us away like we were a mistake." For Meghan, the moment carried deeper layers of pain. For all her public confidence and composure, Those close to her know how profoundly she feels rejection, not just personal rejection, but institutional exclusion. She had entered the royal family with optimism, maybe even a kind of naive hope, believing she could bring something fresh, empathetic, and modern to an ancient system. She was not unaware of the challenge, but she underestimated the resistance. When she married Harry, she imagined herself as a builder of bridges, an actress who had used her platform to advocate for UN women and social justice, who believed she could adapt her values to the crown and help it evolve. She wanted to be a royal who stood for causes with boldness and sincerity, one who didn't just cut ribbons but had the courage to speak. But from the beginning, the institution pushed back, not with overt hostility, but with icy constraint. Every statement had to be cleared, every appearance scripted, every dress, every word, every smile, monitored and recalibrated by unseen hands. To Meghan, it felt like suffocation, and the revocation of her title confirmed, once and for all, that the institution never saw her as a partner. She had not failed to meet their expectations. They had never believed she belonged. This was always about control. Meghan is reported to have told a friend in a phone call days after the announcement. They don't care if you work hard. They don't care if you tell the truth. All they want is for you to stay silent and look pretty. And I was never going to do that. The anger wasn't just personal. It was existential. Meghan had built an identity. One carefully forged across 2 continents, one tested by racism, divorce, career setbacks, and a constant need to prove herself. She had survived the harsh world of Hollywood, where roles were limited and typecast. She had fought her way into recognition as more than just a supporting character. And when she entered the royal family, she believed that recognition would expand into purpose. Instead, she found herself caught in a narrative that had been written generations before she arrived. And when she dared to write her own chapter, they closed the book. The symbolism of giving the title to Lady Louise wasn't lost on Meghan. She saw it for what it was, the firm sending a message. That service means obedience. That silence equals loyalty. That the perfect royal woman is one who stays in the background and never questions the system that rewards her with privileges. To Meghan, that model was not just outdated, it was dangerous. But even as she processed the betrayal, Meghan knew that public reaction was shifting. The early years of overwhelming support, especially in the United States, had given way to fatigue, criticism, and a growing sense that her and Harry's story had lost its moral clarity. People still sympathized with the initial struggles, but the endless stream of interviews, documentaries, and business deals had dulled the edge of their advocacy. The Spotify fallout, in particular, had stung. Being branded a grifter by a high-ranking executive after producing just 1 season of content was not only humiliating, it was devastating to their brand. Now, without the Sussex name, that brand faced an identity crisis. What were they now? Just Harry and Meghan? Just a couple of ex-royals with a podcast that never materialized and a Netflix deal under review? Insiders say Meghan immediately called a crisis PR consultant the day the title transfer was announced. She wasn't looking to spin the narrative, they say. She was looking for clarity. How do you reintroduce yourself when the very thing that made people listen to you is no longer yours? For days, Meghan stayed mostly out of public view. A planned appearance at a female entrepreneurship panel was quietly postponed. A photo shoot for a lifestyle feature was canceled at the last minute. Her team said it was to regroup. In truth, Meghan was devastated. But it was more than just career fallout. The emotional impact was profound. Meghan had long held on to a thin thread of hope that somehow, through time or healing, the royal family would make peace with her. That maybe, just maybe, they would come to see that her intention was never destruction, but reformation. The Sussex title, even as it became a source of controversy, was still a tether to that hope. It was a symbol of the union she had tried to forge between tradition and change. Now, with the title gone, that hope was gone too. In private, Meghan's conversations turned more introspective. She began talking about legacy, what it meant to create impact without royal validation, how to define worth when stripped of a title that carried centuries of institutional weight. One friend, speaking on background, said, "She's not broken. She's reflective. But there's definitely a grief there. A grief for something she wanted to believe could work." As the days turned into weeks, Meghan began quietly reassessing her path. The idea of returning to acting, once firmly rejected, resurfaced. So did discussions about producing more original content, stories unrelated to the monarchy, stories about resilience, about motherhood, about self-worth. She knew that to survive this, she had to pivot, not reactively, but deliberately. Yet even as she plotted her next move, the sting of the decision remained. Because this wasn't just about losing a title. It was about being told, once again, that she didn't belong. That no matter how polished, how hardworking, how intelligent or committed she was, the walls of the institution were not designed to include her. She had thought she was marrying into a family. Instead, she had walked into a fortress. And the fortress had finally closed its gates for good. When the official statement reached Prince Harry, he wasn't in the UK. He wasn't in London or at some high-profile event surrounded by handlers and press. He was at home in California, alone in his study, halfway through a scheduled Zoom call for one of Archwell's mental health partnerships. The message that appeared on his phone was short and cold, royal legal protocol wrapped in polished language. The title of Duke of Sussex has been reassigned. He didn't react immediately. According to sources close to the situation, he asked the staff member running the call to give him a moment, turned off his camera, and sat perfectly still in his chair. Not blinking, not speaking. Just staring at the carpeted floor for what felt like a full 5 minutes. When he finally moved, it was not in panic or anger. It was grief. What many failed to understand, especially those who had come to view Harry as an increasingly alien figure through the lens of media controversies, was that, for all the rebellion, for all the friction, for all the Megxit drama, Harry never truly imagined being permanently cut off from the royal family. He had expected tension. He had expected resistance. But he always held on to the belief that blood, especially royal blood, was thicker than spectacle. Now, that belief had evaporated in a single moment. The title wasn't just ceremonial to him. It wasn't just something he wore like a pin during diplomatic trips. The dukedom of Sussex had been bestowed upon him by his grandmother, the late Queen Elizabeth II, on one of the most meaningful days of his life, his wedding day. It was a title that linked him to her legacy, to her blessing, to her hope that his marriage and his new life would be part of a broader, more inclusive monarchy. And now, that legacy had been stripped, not quietly, not in private, but publicly and symbolically transferred to someone else. Lady Louise Windsor. Harry reportedly left the room and disappeared into the garden. When Meghan found him later, he was seated on a bench overlooking the sea, jaw clenched, eyes bloodshot, hands shaking slightly, not out of rage, but out of something deeper. Abandonment. Loss. A rupture that no therapy session, no breathing exercise, no Oprah special could soothe. She was the last one who believed in me, he reportedly said, referring to the Queen. She gave me that title. Not them. She gave it to me. Meghan sat with him, holding his hand. But even she couldn't reach him in that moment. Because this wasn't about her. It was about something older. Something buried in the roots of a family whose love had always come with conditions. Harry's relationship with his father had never been conventional. While Charles had provided for his sons and attempted to be present during their early years, there was always a gap, a void. After Diana's death, that void widened. The stiffness of royal life, the inability to show emotion, the constant weight of expectations, it all turned Charles into a distant figure in Harry's life. And while he respected his father's public role, he never quite felt emotionally secure in their bond. That emotional insecurity had grown more complicated in recent years, particularly after Charles became king. In private conversations, Harry had tried to remain connected. There were phone calls after Queen Elizabeth's funeral, brief exchanges during Charles's coronation, and even a couple of efforts at reconciliation during Harry's trips to the UK. But they were always short-lived, always awkward. Each interaction ended with more misunderstandings than resolutions. William was no better. The once unbreakable bond between the brothers had deteriorated into near silence. Harry blamed William for being the architect of many of the leaks to the press in their earlier days. William, on the other hand, saw Harry's actions as a betrayal of everything they had been raised to protect. The release of Spare was the final blow. Though some readers found it moving and raw, others, including many inside the royal family, saw it as an unrelenting attack on Harry's brother, sister-in-law, and stepmother. The physical altercation Harry described between him and William was interpreted within royal walls as an unforgivable breach of trust. So when King Charles and his advisors met at Balmoral to finalize the title reassignment, neither William nor Charles reached out to inform Harry beforehand. The decision had been made. There would be no negotiation, no explanation, no emotional buffer. And that silence, the lack of warning, was the part Harry reportedly could not forgive. This wasn't just about a title, one of Harry's close friends said. This was about being publicly erased from a family he never stopped trying to be part of. For all the podcasts, the interviews, the deals, he always saw himself as a Windsor. Always. To outsiders, this may seem ironic or even disingenuous. After all, hadn't Harry walked away? Hadn't he said, time and again, that he wanted to be free of royal constraints? Hadn't he made his peace with being independent? But the truth was more complicated. Harry didn't want to stop being royal. He wanted to be a different kind of royal. One who could serve without submission. One who could raise a family without fear. One who could honor his mother's legacy without repeating her pain. He didn't want to break ties. He wanted to redefine them. And when the family refused, he did what he had always been taught to do when backed into a corner. He fought. With words. With stories. With uncomfortable truths. But now, all those efforts felt hollow. Because the door was not just closed, it was bolted. The Sussex title was gone. And with it, the last formal link between Harry and the institution that had both nurtured and crushed him. Back in Montecito, Harry reportedly began avoiding calls and emails for days. He canceled public appearances, withdrew from production meetings, and spent long hours in isolation. Meghan, though concerned, gave him space. She understood that this grief was not hers to manage. It was his reckoning. A reckoning with a family that had chosen loyalty to structure over loyalty to love. In one particularly telling moment, Harry walked into his son's room, knelt beside Archie's bed while he was napping, and stared at him in silence. I just don't want him to grow up thinking that love is conditional, he later told a friend. That if he makes a mistake, he'll be punished with silence or erasure. Those close to Harry say he is now at a crossroads. One path leads deeper into his new life, fully detached from the royal world, with no illusions of reconciliation. The other leads into something murkier, a desire to reconnect, but with no clear way back. The loss of the title has crystallized a reality he had been trying to avoid, that the royal family has moved on without him. That whatever role he hoped to play in its evolution is no longer on the table. The fury he feels is not explosive. It is slow and steady. It fuels his sense of injustice. It reinforces the trauma of his childhood. And it compels him to keep telling his story, not just to the world, but to himself. Because if the family won't acknowledge his pain, he must document it. Privately, Harry has begun recording voice notes again, diary-style reflections he dictates into his phone. It's a practice he picked up in therapy and continued during the writing of Spare. In these recordings, he tries to process what's happening, not just in terms of loss, but in terms of identity. If he is no longer a duke, no longer a working royal, then what is he? A storyteller? A husband? A father? A survivor? Some within his team are urging him to write a second memoir, one focused less on family and more on healing. Others advise him to pull back, to let the storm pass, and to focus on philanthropic work that can restore his public image. But Harry, stubborn and principled, is reportedly undecided. He has never been good at staying silent. And now, with the world once again defining him in absentia, the urge to speak is stronger than ever. For now, he remains quiet. But inside, Prince Harry rages. Not with theatrical fury, but with the burning sadness of a son who, after everything, still wanted to matter to the people who made him. In a move no one saw coming, King Charles has stripped the Sussex title from Harry and Meghan and reassigned it to Lady Louise, a young royal who's never even spoken publicly about the drama. This stunning royal decree didn't just remove a title, it sent a final, irreversible message. The door to the monarchy is officially closed for good. Why was Lady Louise chosen? What triggered the palace's most ruthless response yet? And how are Meghan and Harry reacting behind closed doors? Stay with us. We're about to reveal the power struggle, the secret meetings, and the devastating fallout the royal family didn't want you to see.